My name is Joe Bressi, and I was born at 1122 West Walnut Street, Coal Township. Went to school at St. Joe's Elementary School. My father died when I was 10 years old, and I ended up moving to Brooklyn, New York for a couple of years. Didn't like it at all. Couldn't get along with my stepdad, so when I was 13, they came back to Shamokin. Made my life here, taught school here, went to Bloomsburg University. I taught school at Stevens Elementary School over on Spruce Street until they tore that down in 1979. I was involved in politics. I was involved in the head teacher at the Stevens School. And over the years, I knew so many people, but they were mostly older people. Jake Spade, Bob Hartman, Matt Treese were all older than me. And it's vital. And when you talk about Fritz Reed was the register and recorder. Fritz Reed was like a history book. Fritz Reed, when it came to Shamokin and Coal Township, knew everything about everything. I'm not exaggerating. When we lost Fritz, it just couldn't be replaced. When we lost your grandfather, it couldn't be replaced. I graduated from Coal Township in 1962. I'm one of the last alumni from Coal Township. I was a Coal Township commissioner from 72 until 76. The hard feelings, I mean, we knew each other, we liked each other, but there was a certain segment of the population. You were from Coal Township, that's not a good thing. You didn't talk to the people from the city. Every family had that. There was a lot of tension. It would have been a great thing when I was a commissioner to get grants or do anything to merge with the city of Shamokin. Instead of having a population of 10,000, 15,000, if we could have merged back at that time, but there was deep, hard feelings and a certain 20 to 30% of the population. We'll never merge with them. Coal Township, of course, surrounded the city of Shamokin. We had a lot of the commercial property, commercial real estate, and the city of Shamokin had downtown. When Walmart was built and some of these other shopping centers, downtown became a thing of the past. Henry Lark was the most powerful political person that Joe Bressi ever knew. After they came in and asked me to run for commissioner, they made me the principal of the Stevens School, the head teacher of the Stevens School. This is how politics works. It worked through Henry Lark. Henry Lark was one of the most interesting guys that I knew. He had an office down in Sunbury on the second floor, and you'd go in there. He was just one powerful man. He had a lot of power with PPL, any large corporation. I mentioned the names of Senator Clark and Senator Scott. They were U.S. senators back at that time. And if Henry Lark needed a favor, or if one of his friends needed a favor, he'd pick up the telephone. And many times I was one of Henry Lark's assistants. And this would have been 1974 or 75. Henry Lark was the Northumberland County chairman, Republican chairman, but he had racetrack stock and the racetrack at Harrisburg. So they dethroned Henry Lark. He had to give up his job as the Republican chairman. Well, he gave up his job, but he appointed 5 co-chairmen: Lawton Schroyer, Bob Verano, Roger Wiest, and Joe Bressi was one of them. So I was one of Henry Lark's co-chairmen, which meant nothing because Henry Lark still called the shots. If you were friends with Henry Lark and you needed a favor, you got it, no questions asked. On election day, Henry Lark would call Joe Bressi, and he'd call people from all over the county, and you'd go down and see Henry Lark, and there would be a bag of money. If the election got real tight, it looked like the Republicans and them, you'd call Henry. I wouldn't call Henry Lark. George Hand or Danny Venn would call Henry Lark. Call Henry Lark, get down here quick, I have another bag of money for you. You'd have to go up. But when I would be the driver, I'd get in the car, I'd drive, and there'd be 2 Republicans with me there, and our job was to get these people out to vote. They wouldn't, I can remember most of the people out in Walnut Street, the elderly ladies couldn't find their socks or their jacket until you handed them $2, right? It took $2. On a real good occasion, if you got the whole family, it would be a $10 bill. And you'd walk in with 10 people, but everything was set up through the local Republican or Democrat the east end of town. We were registering people to vote. And there was a place up in Tioga Street or Wabash Street. Well, we'd go up there, and it was locked. Now, all the Democrats went up on a bus, and they'd register, and I'd go up in the car to get 2 people registered. No, it's sorry, Bressi, we're closed. It was almost like a joke, only it wasn't a joke. They'd lock the door so you couldn't get in to register. If it was their people, the door would be open. It's like, if I told you these stories, you couldn't believe it.
My mom told me the story that when she was old enough to register to vote, a guy came by to take you to register, and she wanted to register Democrat. And the guy said, you can't do that. The Lark family would appreciate if you register Republican, and we know that you want to work for an insurance company. We'll make sure you get that job.
You hit the nail on the head. Right. Matt, that's how it worked. Henry Lark was a good man, but he was a staunch Protestant, wealthy. He didn't want Catholics involved. If a Catholic was going to run for Coal Township, no, I don't want him. I don't want him in there. And what happened is there were more Catholics in Shamokin and Coal Township than Protestants, and it turned out Henry Lark was losing because he didn't have enough Catholics. When Danny Venn came in and talked to me, he said, Joe, we need a Catholic, Republican, Italian from Coal Township. That's how I picked it out. They needed Catholics on that Republican ticket, and that's why they picked me. I was a Catholic. When I ran in the primary, I think there were 12 of us. Danny Venn and George Hand were already commissioners, so they had the in. When I came back from New York, I was very young, but I lived above a place called Layman's Cafe. I met a lot of people. I bartended there, and I knew a lot of people from bartending. I knew a lot of people from selling cars. I sold cars for Paul Caney at PK Motors. So when I got involved, when Henry Lark asked me to run, I gave it my all. I went to everybody, but I came out, of 12 people, I came out on top. And that worked out well because they knew the right people. But Henry Lark's goal at that time was to get Catholics involved because it was backfiring on him. You can't win in Coal Township without Catholics. When Ace Rosini wanted his son, Jim, to run for judge, he'd call Henry Lark and line it all up, and Jim ran for judge. Lost the first time, but won the second time. Ace Rosini and Odone Rosini, long before I ended up on the scene, worked with Henry Lark through the coal business, and they were big contributors. The Rosinis contributed a lot of money to the right people. Henry Lark said, this guy's running. The Rosinis were there. So when it came for Jim Rosini to run for judge, it was a no-brainer. Odone used his money to go out at tax sales and buy up any land he could buy, not with the Rosini partnership, with Odone's money. When Odone passed on, his son, Bob Rosini, and Don, they got a lot of land. They did a lot of good. Money to the area, contacts in Harrisburg and Washington, D.C. All came from that little guy. Henry Lark was probably 5'2". Wasn't a big guy, but powerful, very powerful. His daughter got married. She got married up in Dort, PA. Henry had a big farm up on top of this hill, and we were all invited to his daughter's. Lark was up in the attic getting something, coming down the steps, and an airplane over the Susquehanna River hits a power line. The lights in Henry Lark's house went out. He falls down the attic steps and kills himself. Before he passed away, when Henry got knocked off for having stock in the racetrack, Paul Ruane got his job. Paul Ruane was a legislator at the time, but he got Henry's job. When Henry passed away, and I don't remember what year that was, Henry's secretary, Mary Lou Manny, got that job after Paul. So after he died, Henry Lark was so powerful that it stayed in for a long time. In 1984, Jack Martin came to me and he said, Joe, I need somebody to work for me selling real estate. All of those contacts that I made through politics, the good, the bad, the indifferent, helped me with the real estate business. It was unbelievable. You know, when I voted against the garbage, people said, that guy's an honest guy. I want to work with him. Jack Martin ended up having a heart attack. His building burns down. He comes to me and he says, Joe, I need you to come in and give me a hand. Jack Martin was an appraiser. He also sold a little bit of real estate. He had one secretary, and he had one agent by the name of Snyder, who was a lot older and didn't do much of anything. But Jack Martin needed help, so I went to work for Jack Martin. When I went to work for Jack Martin in the spring of 1984, it got so busy that I retired the next year. I took a sabbatical leave for 1 year, and I retired because I was just busy, really busy. Okay. So the first thing I did is I went down and I bought Yarworth's drugstore. And Yarworth at the time, the dad was maybe retired. He didn't like me. I went in and I said, I want to buy your business. He said, you don't have enough money. Get out of here. Don't talk to me. So I wanted that location, and I knew he was going to retire. So I went in and I offered him $125. You don't have $125. I said, I'll get it. So I took my teacher's, one mistake I made, I took all my teacher's retirement out and blew it on the real estate. But the real estate business worked out real well for me, better than I ever could have imagined. When I bought Martin's business in 1985, my goal was a good percentage of the business were people who left the area. They went to Philadelphia. They graduated from high school in Shamokin or Coal Township, and they went out of town because there was no work here. So what I did is I went around to the high schools, and I got the alumni list. And I had Shamokin, Coal Township, Lourdes, and I think Line Mountain. And I got a paper come back to Shamokin as a result of sending those papers out. And I sent them out probably for 2 or 3 years, and it brought a lot of people back. It brought graduates of Lourdes back because they got that. And on the back of that paper, I'd put our properties, Okay. So they'd call and say, I always had an 800 number, 1-800-HOUSE. So they get that and they'd come back. But as a result of doing that, going from a teacher to a realtor, I had some enemies in town, which, a lot of people didn't like Joe Bressi because he was an Italian and he bought the property at 8th and Independence Street. My dad came over from the old country in 1921. He would have been 21 years old. And he rented in the Bloody Fifth. My dad was born in Ischia, down in the boot, Ischia Soul, all right, which is a calabrese at the bottom of the boot. My mom came from Naples. My godmother, who was Sandy Nestico, she lived out on Independence Street. She would write to those people, come over, we'll find you a place. Her goal, until the day she died, her goal was to bring friends from Ischia over and get them established. But all the names of these Shamokin people, Merarkis, Avelinos, Veranos, came from Ischia. When I was a young kid at 1122 West Walnut Street, that block was mostly Republican, okay? There was a guy by the name of Bud Rogers who lived out in the end of that block. And every election day, Bud Rogers, he didn't hold any kind of office, but he was the local contact. You'd go out to Bud Rogers' house, and whoever's running for anything and wanted to win in the Edgewood district would buy a half barrel of beer and take it to Bud Rogers. Bud Rogers would call all the neighbors in. This is the guy you're voting for, whether you knew him or not. Now, they didn't call my dad because he was a Democrat. But they'd call every Republican around, have a half barrel of beer and a hamburger on John Swank, who's running for whatever. And it was every election, there was half barrels of beer in there. But every neighborhood had their little clique. It was who you knew. You had to know the right guy. It's different now. I'm not involved in politics, but who to call and how to handle it, and who could do you a favor. It was a different world. It was a good world, but a lot of hard feelings.
What about the different? There was got to be an Italian section, a Slovak section, a Polish section,
section. You'd go by the churches. The church at St. Ed's was mostly Italian. Slovak was St. Mary's Church, which was up in the hill. Italian and Irish were over here. I went to St. Joe's Elementary School. It was a mixture. My dad ended up, when they left Rock Street, they moved out in Pine Street. In 1943, the year I was born, they bought a house in Walnut Street. Walnut Street was mostly Republican, Protestant. Now it was all mixed at that time. They started mixing in. But it was unbelievable how the religion and, the political affiliation was strong at that time. It's important that you do things like this because life passes us by so quickly.